The gala's glow faded as Lena Harper slipped into a dimly lit corridor off the Norfolk ballroom, the clink of glasses replaced by the hum of fluorescent lights. Her heart still stung from her family's dismissal. Admiral Richard Holt's cold indifference and Captain Emily Holt's fleeting nod had carved a fresh wound. But now, standing before her, was Admiral Clara Vance, a legend whose name was whispered in naval intelligence circles. Vance's silver hair caught the faint light, her eyes sharp as a sonar ping, locking onto Lena with an intensity that felt like a lifeline or a trap. She held out a small, obsidian keycard, its surface etched with a single word, Vanguard. "We don't let heroes vanish without reason," Vance said, her voice low, gravelly, carrying the weight of secrets. Lena's fingers hesitated, sensing this wasn't just an offer. It was a plunge into a world where shadows held more power than metals. What did Vanguard want with a disgraced commander, and why now? The answer lay in that card, and Lena knew taking it would change everything. The corridor stretched long and sterile, its tiled floor reflecting the faint buzz of overhead lights. Security cameras perched like silent sentinels, their lenses glinting in the corners. Lena's dress felt too tight, her civilian status a flimsy shield against the weight of Vance's gaze. "You saw me tonight," Lena said softly, her voice steady despite the pulse hammering in her throat. "Why?" Vance's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Because some ghosts are too valuable to stay buried." She gestured to a bench tucked against the wall, its metal frame cold under Lena's touch as they sat, a careful distance between them. Vance pulled a worn leather notebook from her jacket, its edges frayed from years of use. "After the Gulf, I kept tabs on you," she said, flipping it open. "Your file was sealed, red-stamped, locked away. But I saw enough. You made a call, saved a life, broke protocol. It cost you, but it saved others." Lena's jaw tightened, memories of that 2017 Gulf mission flashing like a distress signal, the civilian she'd risked everything for, the friend she'd lost. "The review board didn't see it that way," she said, her voice low. Vance scoffed, her eyes flashing. "That board couldn't navigate a calm sea. You held the line when it mattered." Lena looked away, her gaze drifting to the corridor's end, where shadows pooled like spilled ink. "They didn't just take my rank. They took my name." Vance's expression softened, a rare warmth flickering. "Not everyone forgets." She pressed the keycard into Lena's hand, its edges cool and sharp. "Vanguard isn't a unit. It's a network, off-books, autonomous. We don't offer glory. We demand everything." Lena turned the card over, her fingers brushing the word Vanguard. It sparked a memory, whispers in a Bahrain briefing room, rumors of operatives who vanished only to resurface with intel that shifted wars. A sailor she'd known, lost in a raid, had reappeared months later with data that crippled a smuggling network. No report, no medal, just a name. Vanguard. Now it was in her hand, a summons wrapped in secrecy. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vance leaned closer, her breath warm against the chilled air. "Because you've already paid the price. And we need someone who knows what it costs to choose right over orders." She stood, adjusting her uniform with a precision that belied the moment's weight. 3 days, she said, her tone final. "Call the number on the card, or we'll assume you're done for good." Vance turned, her boots echoing down the corridor, leaving Lena alone with the keycard's weight in her palm. The hum of the gala drifted faintly through the walls, a reminder of the world that had cast her out. But this was different. Vanguard wasn't redemption. It was reckoning. Lena slipped the card into her clutch, her heart racing with a mix of dread and fire. Outside, the Norfolk night was sharp with salt air, the distant hum of ships a faint pulse. She stepped into the darkness, the keycard a quiet promise that someone still saw her. But as she walked to her car, a shadow moved in the periphery, a figure watching from the lot's edge, too deliberate to be chance. Who else knew she'd been here tonight? And what did they want with a ghost? The motel room smelled of damp salt and faded dreams, its thin curtains fluttering against a cracked window that let in the restless hum of the Virginia Beach shoreline. Lena Harper sat on the edge of a sagging bed, her hands trembling as she sifted through a battered folder of naval reports, their edges yellowed like old wounds. The papers told a story she'd tried to bury, a 2017 covert operation in the Persian Gulf, where she defied orders to save a civilian, only to lose her friend, Lieutenant Sarah Kane, to a hail of bullets. The guilt was a living thing, coiled behind her ribs, whispering that she'd failed. Her father, Admiral Richard Holt, had sealed her fate with a single sentence: "You traded duty for sentiment." Now, in the flickering light of a bedside lamp, Lena clutched the obsidian Vanguard keycard, its weight a reminder of Admiral Clara Vance's cryptic offer. But as her phone buzzed with an unknown number, a message flashed across the screen. "Vanguard calls its ghosts home." Her pulse spiked. Someone knew she was here, digging into a past the Navy wanted buried. What secrets were they ready to kill for? The room was a time capsule of cheap linoleum and peeling wallpaper, the kind of place where secrets went to hide. Lena spread the reports across the bed, each page a shard of that Gulf night. The mission had been simple: secure a smuggler's vessel suspected of carrying weapons. Intel swore the ship was empty of civilians. It wasn't. Lena saw her first, a young woman, barely 20, blood streaking her face, cowering behind a crate as gunfire erupted. The order crackled through her comms: "Fall back. Risk of ambush." But Lena had already broken cover, her boots pounding across the deck, heart hammering. Sarah's voice hissed in her earpiece: "Lena, where the hell are you going?" "There's a civilian." Lena snapped, her gun drawn low. She reached the woman, her body frail, trembling, clinging to Lena like a lifeline. Then came the crack of gunfire, sharp and relentless. Lena dropped behind a steel drum, shielding the woman, her radio buzzing with static, then silence. When Lena reached the extraction point, Sarah was gone. They found her body an hour later, caught in a crossfire she shouldn't have faced. The official report was clinical: enemy engagement during retreat. Judgment error by Commander Harper. Her name appeared once, redacted in every public version. No court-martial, no demotion, just a quiet exile from the Navy and her family. Lena's fingers traced Sarah's dog tags, tucked in her pocket since that day, their edges worn from years of carrying her guilt. She hadn't sent them to Sarah's family. She hadn't earned the right. Her father's words echoed from her hospital bed, where she'd lain with a shattered ankle and 30 stitches. "You broke the chain of command. You cost a life." Her name was Sarah. Lena had whispered. "She was my friend." "She was your responsibility," he'd shot back, his voice cold as steel. Now, in the motel's dim light, Lena's eyes burned as she read the final report line: "Lieutenant Sarah Kane, Kia." But Sarah's laugh haunted her louder than any citation, her voice clear in a memory. "The Navy gives you orders, Lena, but war gives you reasons." The phone buzzed again, the same unknown number. This time, a photo loaded, a grainy image of Lena at the gala standing alone, time-stamped hours ago. Her breath caught. Someone had been watching, close enough to capture her isolation. The message beneath read: "The Gulf isn't done with you. Answer Vanguard." Lena's grip tightened on the keycard, its edges biting her palm. Vanguard wasn't just a network anno domini. It was a summons to a fight she'd tried to leave behind. She stood, heart racing, and slipped the dog tags back into her pocket. The past was a hunter, and it had found her. But as she stared at the phone, a shadow moved outside the window, a faint silhouette against the neon glow of the motel sign. Was it Vanguard, or something darker? The door was locked, but the night felt alive with eyes, and Lena knew she was running out of time to choose her side. The Virginia night pressed against the glass walls of Vanguard's covert tech hub, a sleek fortress disguised as a nondescript office tower in Arlington. Lena Harper stepped out of the elevator, the obsidian keycard from Admiral Clara Vance still warm in her pocket, its single word, Vanguard, a pulse of possibility and danger. Inside, holographic screens glowed with global threat maps, their data streams curving like currents in a storm. Lena's creation, a cyber defense system she'd built in sleepless nights after her Navy exile, hummed at the heart of it all. But her name was nowhere on it, erased, hidden behind a shell corporation to keep her a ghost. As she faced her colleague, Zoe Tran, a brilliant coder with a hacker's edge, a question hung in the air. Would Lena let herself be erased again? Zoe's sharp gaze and a cryptic note scrawled on a server log. "The shield they need is you," ignited a fire in Lena's chest. But as the system flickered with an incoming alert, a shadow loomed. Someone was probing Vanguard's defenses, and they knew exactly where to strike. The hub was a labyrinth of tech and tension, its air thick with the hum of servers and the faint scent of ozone. Zoe stood at her workstation, surrounded by a constellation of screens, her fingers dancing over a keyboard as she tracked a malware signature from a foreign IP. "Cerberus caught it," she said, her voice clipped but warm, a grin flashing. "I'm feeding it to Hydra to neutralize." Lena raised an eyebrow, stepping closer. "Tell me you didn't tap NSA nodes again." Zoe's smirk was pure defiance. They left the door open. Classic Zoe, 28, a dropout genius who'd traded MIT for a cause. Lena's gaze drifted to the central projection, where her code wove a digital shield against cyber threats. Every line was hers, born from nights in a cramped apartment, fueled by coffee and fury. She hadn't worn a uniform in 7 years, but this was her war now: data instead of bullets, algorithms instead of ambushes. Status. Lena asked, her eyes locked on the threat matrix. Zoe's fingers paused. 2 weeks from Pentagon review. If Vanguard passes, it's deployed across all naval bases. Lena's chest tightened. "And my name?" Zoe hesitated, her usual bravado faltering. "You're not on the docks. They wouldn't sign if you were." Lena nodded, the sting familiar but sharp. Her work was invisible, just like her at the gala, where her father, Admiral Richard Holt, and sister, Emily, had ignored her. But Vanguard was more than code. It was proof she hadn't vanished. Zoe turned, her gaze piercing. "You really okay with them taking credit for this?" Lena didn't answer, her eyes drawn to a server log pinned to the wall. In Zoe's tight scrawl, it read, "The shield they need is you." The words hit like a depth charge, stirring a resolve she'd buried with her Navy career. Lena moved to the primary projection wall, her fingers grazing the panel. The interface pulsed, responding to her touch, mapping threats from hostile networks to rogue satellites. She'd built this to prevent wars, not win them. But the alert Zoe was tracking blinked red, escalating. "It's targeted," Zoe said, her voice low. "Someone's testing our outer layer, and they're good." Lena's pulse quickened. The probe wasn't random, it was surgical, hitting vulnerabilities only an insider would know. "Trace it," she ordered, her commander's voice slipping through. Zoe's screen lit up, code scrolling fast. "It's bouncing through proxies, but the signature, it's got Pentagon markers." Lena froze. Someone inside the Navy was testing her system, or her. Was this tied to Vance's offer? Or was it Richard, her father, flexing his influence to keep her buried? Zoe's voice broke the silence. If this breaches, Vanguard's exposed before the review. Lena's mind raced. Exposure meant more than a failed test. It could unravel the network, her work, her chance at redemption. She leaned over Zoe's shoulder, scanning the code. "Reroute through the secondary firewall. I built a backdoor for this." Zoe nodded, her fingers flying. The alert dimmed, but the threat lingered, a ghost in the machine. Lena stepped back, the note's words echoing. "The shield they need is you." She wasn't just fighting for her legacy, she was fighting for the nation's safety. But as the screen stabilized, a new message pinged on Zoe's secure line, untraceable, chilling. "Harper, we see you." Lena's breath caught. Someone wasn't just probing Vanguard. They were hunting her. The wind howled around the abandoned lighthouse on Virginia's eastern shore, its weathered stone tower standing like a sentinel over a restless sea. Lena Harper climbed the creaking stairs to the attic, the Vanguard keycard tucked in her pocket, its promise of purpose warring with the ghosts of her past. The air was thick with dust and salt, the scent of her mother Anna's forgotten sanctuary. Lena had come here chasing a hunch, driven by the cryptic message that had followed her from the motel. Vanguard calls its ghosts home. But it was the discovery in her mother's old chest that stopped her cold, a leather-bound journal and a sealed envelope, both bearing Anna's elegant script. Inside was a will, not the one filed at her death, but a hidden original, bequeathing a coastal plot and $750,000 for Haven Home, a refuge for female veterans. The words, "Don't let them silence your fire," burned into Lena's soul. Her father, Admiral Richard Holt, had buried this legacy just as he'd buried her career. But as Lena clutched the papers, a faint creak echoed from below. Someone was in the lighthouse, and they weren't supposed to be here. The attic was a time capsule, its slanted beams draped in cobwebs, sunlight slicing through a cracked window. Lena knelt by the chest, her fingers trembling as she opened the journal. Anna's handwriting danced across the pages, vivid despite the years. "Lena, they'll try to erase you, but you are my lighthouse, shine through the storm." The entry was dated 6 months before Anna's death from illness, a time when Richard had claimed she was too frail to think clearly. The envelope held the will, notarized in 2014, detailing Haven Home, a sanctuary for women like Lena, broken by war or betrayal. The final line read, "To my daughter, Lena Harper, sole steward, non-transferable." Lena's throat tightened. Her mother had seen her, believed in her, when no one else had. But the will wasn't all. Tucked in the journal's binding was a letter, Anna's last words. "If Richard fights this, he's hiding more than money. Find the truth." Lena's pulse raced. Her father had presented a forged will at probate, erasing Haven Home to protect his legacy, or something darker. She stood, clutching the documents, her mind reeling. Why had he gone to such lengths? What was he afraid she'd become? The lighthouse groaned under the wind's assault, its beams creaking like a warning. Lena's eyes darted to the trapdoor. The gala shadow, the motel's watcher, the Vanguard probe, someone was circling her, and this was a fuse to a larger explosion. She descended the stairs, the journal pressed to her chest. The lighthouse's lower chamber was dark, its walls slick with sea damp. A floorboard creaked, too deliberate for the wind. Lena froze, her Navy instincts kicking in. "Who's there?" she called, her voice steady despite the chill crawling up her spine. Silence answered, but the air felt alive, heavy with intent. She slipped the will into her bag, her hand brushing the dog tags she still carried. Sarah Kane's, a reminder of the cost of her choices. The Vanguard keycard in her pocket felt heavier now, tying her to a network that might hold answers or enemies. A shadow flickered at the edge of the spiral staircase, gone before Lena could focus. Her breath hitched. She wasn't alone. She moved toward the door, her step silent, but the faint scrape of boots on stone followed. Outside, the sea roared, masking any sound of pursuit. Lena reached the exit, the cold night air hitting her like a slap. She glanced back, the lighthouse looming dark and silent. But as she stepped onto the rocky path, her phone buzzed, a new message from an unknown number. "The will is only the beginning. Vanguard waits." Lena's grip tightened on her bag. Someone knew she'd found it, and they were close, too close. The truth about Haven Home wasn't just her mother's dream. It was a secret someone would kill to keep buried. She hurried to her car, the journals weighed a promise and a threat, her heart pounding with the certainty that the storm was just beginning. The air in the Naval Archive at Norfolk's base was dry as old bones, the faint buzz of fluorescent lights overhead a stark contrast to the stormy sea outside Lena Harper's lighthouse discovery. She stood before a reinforced plexiglass window, clutching her mother Anna's journal, its cryptic note, "Find the truth," burning in her mind. The Vanguard keycard in her pocket felt like a ticking bomb, its promise of purpose now tangled with the will for Haven Home, her mother's buried dream. Lena was here for one thing, a letter from her friend Sarah Kane, written before their doomed 2017 Gulf mission. Sarah had scribbled a code on a napkin once, calling it backup breadcrumbs. Now that code had led Lena to this vault, where secrets slept under layers of bureaucracy. But as she handed the code to the archivist, a grizzled sergeant named Victor Grayson, her phone vibrated with a new message. "Stop digging, Harper. Some truths stay buried." Her heart raced. Someone was watching, and the letter she sought might unravel more than her past. It could expose a conspiracy reaching the Navy's highest ranks. The archive's corridor was a maze of steel drawers, each labeled with cryptic codes, the air heavy with the weight of forgotten wars. Victor's eyes, creased with years, studied Lena as she spoke. "I need a letter from Lieutenant Sarah Kane, Operation Tidebreaker, March 2017, she said, her voice steady despite the chill of the unknown message. Victor leaned back, his chair creaking. "Those files are sealed. No survivor letters logged." Lena slid the journal page across the counter, Sarah's code scrawled in blue ink. She wrote it for her mother. It was in her vest before we deployed. Victor's eyebrows twitched, a flicker of recognition. "You're that Harper?" he asked. Lena nodded, her tone flat. "The only one who walked off that ship." He exhaled, then stood. "Follow me." They passed through keycard locks and a biometric scanner, the archive's core chamber a fortress of floor-to-ceiling files. Victor moved with precision, his fingers trailing rows until he stopped at drawer 7C. He slid it open, revealing packets sealed like time capsules. One bore Sarah's initials, marked non-authorized delivery, flagged. Lena's hands trembled as she took it, peeling back the flap. Inside was a single sheet, its edges curled with age, Sarah's blocky handwriting unmistakable. "Dear Mom," it began. "If this reaches you, I didn't make it. But Lena Harper did something no order could teach. She saw a civilian bleeding and went back when command said retreat. I followed her, Mom, not the Navy, her. Because some lives are worth more than protocol." Lena sank onto a steel bench, her eyes stinging as she read. Sarah's words painted the Gulf mission vividly. The civilian woman, the gunfire, Lena dragging her to safety while shielding her body. "Lena saved her, and she tried to save me," Sarah wrote. "She didn't leave me. I told her to run." A final line, scrawled in the margin, broke Lena's heart. "Tell Lena I trusted her more than anyone." The letter was absolution, shattering the guilt Lena had carried for years. She looked up at Victor, her voice tight. "Why wasn't this sent?" He shrugged, his eyes guarded. "Flagged as non-deliverable. Either the sender lacked clearance or someone with rank pulled it." Lena's grip tightened on the paper. "Who could do that?" Victor's voice dropped. "Only a flag officer. An admiral, maybe." The name hung unspoken. Richard Holt, her father. Lena's mind raced, connecting the dots, her erased career, Anna's hidden will, and now Sarah's silenced letter. This wasn't just personal. It was a cover-up, and Richard's shadow loomed large. She folded the letter with care, its words a weapon she hadn't expected. But as she stood, Victor's radio crackled, a voice cutting through. "Security breach, Sector 4. Unknown access attempt." Lena's pulse spiked. The archive wasn't just a vault, it was a target. She slipped the letter into her bag, next to the Vanguard keycard, and glanced at Victor. "Get me out of here, now." He nodded, leading her through a side exit, but as they moved, a shadow flickered in the corridor's end, a figure, too quick to identify, vanishing into the dark. Lena's breath caught. The letter was her proof, but it had painted a target on her back, and someone was already closing in. The Navy's Legal Review Office in Norfolk was a fortress of polished wood and faded flags, its air thick with the musk of old paper and unspoken verdicts. Lena Harper stood outside room 3B, clutching a file that held her redemption, or her ruin, Sarah Kane's letter, her forged discharge papers, and logs proving she built Vanguard's cyber defense system. The weight of her mother Anna's hidden will for Haven Homes still burned in her mind, as did the chilling message from the archive. Some truths stay buried. Her father, Admiral Richard Holt, had silenced her past, but today she'd force it into the light. As she entered, Captain Rachel Nguyen's sharp eyes met hers, a clipboard in hand, her uniform crisp as a blade. But Lena's phone buzzed with a new alert, a leaked article accusing her of abandoning her post in the Gulf, its metadata tied to Richard's command codes. The smear was no accident, it was war. Someone wanted her silenced before Vanguard's Pentagon review, and as Lena handed over her evidence, a shadow moved outside the window, a watcher, waiting for her to falter. The room was stark, its walls lined with commendations and a single framed map of the Pacific. Rachel gestured to a chair, her expression neutral, but her gaze probing. "Commander Harper, let's see your case," she said, her voice clipped. Lena slid the file across the desk, her heart pounding like a ship's engine. Sarah's letter lay on top, its words a beacon. "Lena saved a civilian and tried to save me. I trusted her." Next were the discharge papers, Richard's signature forged to bench her without review. Finally, a USB drive from Zoe Tran, Vanguard's chief engineer, logging Lena's code commits, proof she'd built the system now under Pentagon scrutiny. Rachel's brow furrowed as she read, her fingers pausing on the forged signature. "This is irregular," she murmured. "Your retirement was filed under medical grounds, signed by Admiral Holt. Was that authorized?" "No," Lena said, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "I never saw those forms. I wasn't unfit. I was erased." Rachel leaned back, her eyes narrowing. "If true, this violates Navy protocol and federal law. But we need corroboration." Lena tapped the USB. "Zoe's logs show every line of Vanguard I wrote. I've been here, off the books for years." Rachel turned the drive over, her expression shifting to unease. "The Vanguard system? It's set for DoD approval next week." Lena nodded. "And I built it." The room felt smaller, the air charged with the weight of what was unfolding. Rachel flipped to Sarah's letter, her lips tightening. "This is powerful, but the forgery, it's explosive. Dated a week after your Gulf mission, no medical notes, just Holt's signature." Lena's phone buzzed again, Zoe's name flashing. She glanced at the message. Pentagon's fast-tracking Vanguard. Vance signed Stage 1. Smear spreading, check Navy forums. Lena's blood ran cold. The article, now viral, painted her as a traitor, cropping out her authority to act in the Gulf. Zoe's follow-up text was a bombshell. Metadata shows Richard's old command stub. He's behind it. Lena's hands clenched. This wasn't just retaliation. It was a desperate move to bury her before Vanguard went live. She looked at Rachel. "My father doctored the report. He's smearing me to protect his legacy." Rachel's eyes met hers, steady but grave. If this checks out, it could trigger a congressional inquiry. The stakes were higher than Lena had imagined. Vanguard wasn't just her creation. It was a shield for national security, and Richard's sabotage could unravel it. She leaned forward. "I want my case reopened. Let the truth stand." Rachel nodded slowly. "We'll verify the logs and letter. But this smear, it's moving fast. You need to prepare for blowback." Lena's mind raced. Blowback meant more than headlines. It meant enemies in the shadows, maybe even within Vanguard. As Rachel gathered the files, a faint tap came from the window, a pebble, deliberate, not wind. Lena's gaze snapped to the glass, catching a fleeting silhouette before it vanished. Her heart thundered. Someone was out there, tracking her every move. The truth was her weapon, but it had made her a target, and the Pentagon's review was a ticking clock. She stood, gripping her bag, ready to face the storm, but a question lingered. Who else knew what Richard was hiding? The dawn broke over the Virginia coast, painting the new walls of Haven Home with a soft golden glow, its stone facade rising like a promise kept. Lena Harper stood at the edge of the dedication ceremony, her heart pounding with a cadence she hadn't felt since her Navy days. The crowd, veterans, families, and young faces drawn by whispers of her story, sat in rows of chairs, their eyes fixed on the podium where Admiral Clara Vance prepared to speak. Lena's fight had brought her here. Sarah Kane's letter, her mother Anna's will, and the truth of her forged discharge had unraveled Admiral Richard Holt's lies. Vanguard's approval loomed, but a cryptic message from the night before. "The truth has enemies, Harper. hung like a storm cloud. As Lena adjusted her blazer, no longer a ghost but not yet whole, a young girl in the crowd caught her eye, her auburn hair eerily familiar. Was she tied to Sarah? The answer could change everything, and Lena sensed the ceremony was about to rewrite her legacy, or ignite a final battle. The air was crisp with sea salt, the American flags lining the path snapping in the breeze. Haven Home stood on the land Anna's will had her claimed, its bricks salvaged from the Gulf outpost where Lena and Sarah had made their stand. Volunteers, some in work boots, others with medals pinned to their chests, mingled with civilians, their chatter a low hum of hope. Lena's sister, Captain Emily Holt, stood near the front, her dress blues immaculate, her expression unreadable. Richard, her father, sat beside her, his admiral's hat in his lap, his jaw tight as stone. He hadn't spoken to Lena since the notary's office, where Anna's will was authenticated, transferring Haven Home to her. That silence was his weapon, but today it felt brittle. Vance stepped to the podium, her 4 silver stars glinting like a verdict. "We gather to honor service," she began, her voice steady, commanding. Captain Emily Holt embodies courage. The crowd applauded, but Vance's gaze swept the rows, landing on Lena. But service isn't bound by one name or one moment. A hush fell, phones rising as whispers spread. A decade ago, a commander chose conscience over orders, saving a life at great cost. Her record was buried, but truth doesn't stay silent. Lena's breath caught. Vance's voice rose. "Commander Lena Harper, please stand." For a heartbeat, Lena froze, the weight of 100 eyes pressing into her. Then she rose, her shoulders squared, her heart racing. The crowd stirred, cameras clicking. Richard's knuckles whitened, his lips a grim line. Emily's eyes darted between Lena and Vance, stunned. "On behalf of the Navy," Vance said, "Lena Harper is reinstated as commander, retired with honor. Her record is corrected, effective immediately." She raised a sharp salute, and Lena returned it, her hand steady despite the tremor in her chest. The applause began, tentative then swelling real. Lena's eyes found the girl again, Sarah's daughter. She realized, her jawline a mirror of her mother's. The girl's gaze held pride, and Lena's throat tightened. Emily stepped forward, hesitating, then extended a hand. And it was Lena's old commander's insignia, its edges worn but gleaming. "This is yours," Emily said softly, her voice cracking. "Wear it again." Lena took it, their fingers brushing, a silent bridge rebuilt. Richard remained seated, his silence louder than the crowd. But as Vance stepped down, she slipped Lena a note. "Vanguard is yours. Watch your back." Lena's pulse spiked. The approval was signed, but the message from last night echoed. Someone still wanted her silenced. The girl approached, her voice soft. "My mom was Sarah Kane. She said you saved her soul." Lena bent down, her voice steady. "Promise me you'll never let them erase you." The girl nodded, and Lena stood, the insignia heavy in her hand. Haven Home was her victory, but the shadow of enemies lingered, waiting to strike. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across Haven Home's grounds, where the last notes of the ceremony's trumpet call faded into the sea breeze. Lena Harper stood by the entrance, her commander's insignia pinned to her blazer, its weight a quiet anchor. The crowd had dispersed, leaving only the hum of waves and the carved sign, "Haven Home, where valor finds rest." She traced the letters, feeling Anna's dream and Sarah's trust woven into the stone. The girl, Sarah's daughter, lingered nearby, her small hand clutching a photo of her mother, her eyes bright with a future Lena had fought to protect. Emily had left with a nod, not warmth, but a start. Richard's absence was a wound, but one Lena no longer carried alone. Vanguard was secure, her legacy restored, but the cryptic warning, "The truth has enemies," whispered of battles yet to come. Lena smiled softly, the sea's rhythm a reminder that some wars end not with gunfire, but with homes built from courage. She turned, ready to lead Haven Home into its next chapter, a beacon for those the world tried to forget. Her heart was steady, her fire unquenched. If Lena's journey moved you, hit that like button and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment, type 1 if her fight for redemption hit you deep, or 2 if you're wondering what shadows still lurk. Subscribe and ring the bell to join us for more stories of courage that refuse to be silenced. Let's keep the truth alive together. If Lena's journey moved you, hit that like button and share the story with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment, type 1 if her fight for redemption hit you deep, or 2 if you're wondering what shadows still lurk. Subscribe and ring the bell to join us for more stories of courage that refuse to be silenced. Let's keep the truth alive together.